osteoporosis is a chronic disease and is characterized by decreased bone mineral density, impaired bone strength, and increased risk of fragility fractures. So that basically means it's a condition that weakens your bones, so you're more likely to break them and have fractures, and it leads to things like hip fractures when you break your hips, like when you break spine, vertebrae bones, and like broken ribs, broken wrist, broken pelvis. And it's due to when you don't get enough like calcium, phosphate, vitamin D in your diet, for example, and it can lead to decrease of bone strength. And vitamin D is a huge part of the bone mineral matrix, and you get it from sunlight exposure. Calcium and phosphate, obviously, you can get it from your diet, which is really important. The most common injuries are like broken wrist, broken hip, and broken spines, which we've talked about. And it's a chronic disease, which means it usually happens over time. And it usually is not painful unless you have a fracture or you break a bone. And that's usually when it's first diagnosed. Or if you're older, you can recognize it by your change in posture, which you can see in that picture there. You have like a stooping, bending forward position, a loss of height, so you get shorter by an inch or so, bone fractures, and shortness of breath or pain in the lower back. Okay, and a very important fact right there was an estimate of the worldwide annual cost of hip fracture in 1990 was $34.8 billion. And this is set to rise by $131.5 billion by 2050. So that's a cost of $21,000 per patient only just for hip fracture, which is a significant amount to spend on just one fragility fracture alone. Okay, so in elderly or postmenopausal women, vitamin D deficiency may aggravate osteoporosis. So in postmenopausal women, when they reach menopause, they have major hormonal changes. And one of the main hormonal changes is that their levels of estrogen decreases. And that's one of the reasons why women are more prone to osteoporosis than men, which we'll see later in the statistics. Okay, so obviously, your diet is very important in preventing osteoporosis. So calcium, phosphate, you have to get enough of those. So you can get it from like almonds, tofu, chia seeds, sesame seeds, and all of that. But if we look at alcohol, it's drinking heavily, smoking heavily is a very like high risk factor for osteoporosis. And it leads to bone loss. So it's very important to limit the consumption. Caffeine, tea, soft drinks, all of that also decreases calcium absorption. So even if you intake it through your diet, when you have high intake of these type of drinks, it decreases calcium absorption and it contributes to bone loss. And then soft drinks. So some studies suggest that colas, more than any other fizzy drinks, leads to bone loss more. Okay, so this is just a table of your like daily calcium intake you should have. So if you're like 1 to 3 years old, so infancy, about 700 calcium per day. If you're adolescent, so 14 to 18 is 1,300 calcium per day. And then for adults, so women is around 1,000. And if they're at menopause, 1,200. And obviously the same for men. Okay, so my country, some statistics I choose to do was Bulgaria and the UK. So Bulgaria first. So in 2019, the average cost of osteoporotic fractures in Bulgaria was 26.4 euros, while in 2010, this average was 6.6. So there's a significant increase from just 6.6 to 26.4 per person. And in 2019, when they did a study, Bulgaria ranked 25th in place in terms of the highest cost of osteoporotic fractures. Okay, and the healthcare cost of osteoporotic fractures. So the cost of fractures in Bulgaria accounted for 4.2% of healthcare spending. So the amount of spending that they spent on all types of diseases and fractures and treatment, 4.2% of that just went to osteoporotic fractures alone. And then there's 56,000 new fragility fractures in Bulgaria now, with 150 fractures per day, and that's 6.4 fractures per hour. Okay, and also if you look at that graph, 80.4% is women who have osteoporosis and 19.6 men. And we talked about that, and that's due to the estrogen levels decreasing when women reach menopause. Osteoporosis affects 3 million people in the UK, so obviously it's more significant in the UK compared to Bulgaria. And in 1 in 4 people die within a year suffering from hip fractures alone. And more than 500,000 people receive hospital treatment in the UK from osteoporosis. And there's a society called Royal Osteoporosis Society created in the UK to help people to live with osteoporosis and help prevent them. And then also, if you look at that top picture in the corner there, 2.8 million are women that are affected. Again, the rate is more higher in women than men. And then every year, hip fractures alone account for $1.5 billion in English hospital costs and in 1.3 million bed days in English hospitals alone, just due to hip fractures alone. That's my references. Thank you.